The boxes were already outside when Elena Carter pulled into the driveway. Her belongings scattered across the grass like something unwanted, like her life had been packed up and discarded without a second thought. Her wedding photo lay face down near the curb. Standing at the door was her husband, Daniel Reeves. Calm and distant, and behind him, wrapped in Elena's silk robe, was another woman smiling like she had already taken everything that mattered. "You should leave," Daniel said, as if she were the inconvenience. Elena didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just looked past him into the house she had quietly paid for, because what Daniel didn't know was that he hadn't just humiliated his wife. He had just thrown out the woman who owned the company he worked for. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. 3 hours earlier, Elena still believed her marriage could be saved. She had left work early that day, something she almost never did. Her assistant had noticed, of course everyone noticed when Elena changed her routine, but no one asked questions. They never did. Elena preferred it that way. The drive home had been quiet. Too quiet. She had replayed Daniel's words from the night before over and over in her head. The way he had spoken to her, dismissive, irritated, like she was a burden he had outgrown. It hadn't been the first time. Months now, something had been off. Late nights at work, sudden business trips, phone calls taken in another room, and when she asked, he would brush it off with a tired sigh, as if she were the one being unreasonable. She had wanted to believe him. She had chosen to believe him. Because the alternative felt like admitting she had built her life around someone who never really saw her. When she turned onto their street, nothing seemed out of place at first. The same trimmed lawns, spacing prim, quiet houses, the same neighbors who waved politely and kept their distance. Then she saw it, the boxes, dozens of them. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel, but her expression didn't change. She parked slowly, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment longer than necessary. There it was. The truth she had avoided. When she stepped out of the car, the air felt heavier. The sprinklers were still running, soaking the edge of a cardboard box filled with her clothes. A book she had been reading last week was half open in the grass. Her coat lay crumpled near the mailbox. Someone had done this in a hurry, or without care. She walked toward the house, steady and quiet. The front door opened before she reached it. Daniel stood there, arms crossed, his expression flat. No guilt, no hesitation, just irritation, like she had shown up at the wrong time. "Elena," he said, not warmly, not even neutrally. Just her name. Behind him, the woman stepped into view. Blonde, younger, confident in a way that only came from believing you had already won. She adjusted the silk robe around her shoulders, Elena's robe, and leaned slightly into Daniel's space, claiming it without saying a word. "I packed your things," Daniel said. "It's better if you stay somewhere else for now." For now. Elena studied him, really studied him. The man she had married, the man she quietly supported even when he didn't know it. The man who stood in a house he believed was his, wearing confidence he believed he had earned. "How long?" she asked. Daniel exhaled, annoyed. "Does it matter? It does to me." He glanced back at the woman, then returned his gaze to Elena. "About 2 years. 2 years. Elena nodded once, not because she accepted it, but because she understood something important in that moment. This wasn't a mistake. This was a decision. "We're together now," he added, like he was clarifying something obvious. "You had to know this wasn't working." Elena almost smiled, not because it was funny, because it was predictable. She could have ended it right there. She could have pulled out her phone, opened the documents, shown him the ownership's structure of the house. The trust, the signatures, the quiet network of decisions that connected everything in his life back to her. She could have told him who really approved his promotions, who signed off on the budgets, who made sure his career kept moving forward even when he barely deserved it. But she didn't. Because Elena didn't make moves out of emotion. "Okay," she said instead. Daniel blinked, thrown off by the lack of resistance. He had expected tears, anger, something dramatic. "That's it?" he asked. "That's it." She walked past him, into the house for the last time. The woman stepped aside, watching her with quiet curiosity. Elena didn't look at her again. Inside, everything felt smaller than she remembered. Not physically, emotionally. Like the space had shrunk to match the reality of what it had always been. She picked up a few things that hadn't made it into the boxes. A watch, a folder, a set of keys. Daniel followed her halfway into the living room. "You can take the rest later," he said. "We'll figure out the details, Elena paused for a second, then continued moving. Outside, she loaded the last box into her car. Her movements were precise, controlled. No shaking hands, no rushed breathing, just quiet execution. As she closed the trunk, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, a name saved under two simple initials, RC. She answered through the car's Bluetooth as she got behind the wheel. "I saw the alert," the voice said immediately. Calm, professional, concerned, but controlled. "Do you want us to intervene?" Elena looked once at the house in her rearview mirror, at the man who thought he had just taken control of his life, and the life he didn't realize had never belonged to him. "No," she said softly. A small pause on the other end. "Then we wait?" Elena's expression didn't change. "Yes," she said. "We wait." She ended the call, started the engine, and drove away without looking back again. Behind her, Daniel stood in the doorway of a house he thought was his, and for the first time, everything in his life was about to start unraveling. The penthouse suite was silent when Elena steps inside. Not the kind of silence that felt empty, but the kind that felt controlled, designed, every surface clean, every detail intentional. It was the opposite of the house she had just left. She placed her keys on the marble counter and stood there for a moment, letting the stillness settle around her. No raised voices. No tension lingering in the ear, no pretending, just quiet. Her phone lit up again. "Daniel, call number 6. She let it ring until it stopped. Then came the message. "Where are you? We need to talk about this. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Elena stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. He still thought this was something he controlled. A disagreement, a situation he could manage. He still thought she needed him. She set the phone down without replying and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city stretched out below her, glowing in late afternoon light. Glass towers, traffic lines, movement everywhere. A world Daniel had never really seen. Another phone buzz. "Not him this time, Richard," she answered. "Everything is secured," he said immediately. His voice was calm, but there was an edge underneath it. "Your personal belongings from the property will be retrieved tomorrow morning through legal access. No confrontation." "Good." A short pause. "And Daniel?" Elena didn't answer right away. She watched a helicopter pass slowly across the skyline. "He believes he made a decision," she said finally. Richard let out a quiet breath. He doesn't understand what he just did. "No, and you want us to continue holding?" Elena turned slightly, leaning one hand against the glass. "Yes." "How long?" Her eyes didn't move, long enough for him to feel secure. Another pause. Richard knew what that meant. "Understood," he said. "Legal and HR are ready when you give the word." Elena ended the call without another word. She walked to the bedroom and opened the closet. A different life hung there. Tailored suits, designer fabrics, clean lines. Nothing like the simple wardrobe she kept at the house with Daniel. That version of her had been carefully constructed, neutral, unthreatening, easy to underestimate. She had played that role well, too well. Her reflection in the mirror looked back at her. Same face, same eyes. But something had shifted. Not broken, sharpened. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a text from an unknown number. She already knew who it was. Daniel had switched to another phone. "You can't just disappear like this. We need to talk about the house. The house." Elena almost laughed. She typed nothing, deleted the draft, set the phone down again. Instead, she walked back into the living area and picked up her tablet. With a few taps, the secured system opened. Layers of authentication passed in seconds. Her world. Her real one. The dashboard loaded. Financial reports, subsidiary performance metrics, internal communications. Everything running exactly as it should, including the division where Daniel worked. She pulled up the company structure. Orion Systems at the top. Beneath it, a network of subsidiaries, one of them highlighted in blue. The one Daniel believed was his entire career. She tapped into employee records. Daniel Reeves. Position: Senior marketing associate, salary, benefits, performance reviews, all of it, approved, signed, routed through layers of management, but ultimately authorized from above. From her, he had complained about leadership for years, about executives who didn't understand the real work. He had been complaining about her, and never once realized it. Elena closed the file. Her jaw tightened for the first time. Not from anger, from clarity. Another notification appeared, this time from legal. Patricia, draft ready. Filing upon your confirmation. Elena opened the document. Divorce papers. Clean, direct. No claims, no demands, no unnecessary conflict. She read every line slowly. There was power in restraint. If she wanted, she could dismantle him immediately. Financially, legally, publicly. But that wasn't the move, not yet. She typed one word, proceed. A moment later, Patricia replied. Filed within the hour. Elena set the tablet down and exhaled slowly. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. And timing. Her phone buzzed again. This time a different name. Janet? Elena answered. We finished the background review, Janet said. You'll want to hear this. Elena didn't move. I already know enough. Not this part, Janet said. They've been using company resources. Quietly. Hotels, travel, expenses. It traces back to corporate accounts. Elena's gaze hardened slightly. Of course it did. Daniel thought he was paying for those things himself. Thought he had earned that access. He never questioned where it came from. Keep digging, Elena said. There's more, Janet added. The relationship may violate internal policy, depending on roles and access. Elena's eyes flicked back to the tablet on the table. There it was, the first real crack. Send everything to Richard, she said. And Elena Janet hesitated. Yes? If we move forward with this, it won't just affect them. It'll trigger a chain reaction. Elena looked back out at the city. That's the point. She ended the call. Across town, Daniel was probably pacing through a house he believed he still owned, sitting on furniture he thought he had bought, making plans with a woman who thought she had secured a better life. None of them understood the system they were standing inside. None of them understood who controlled it. Lena picked up her phone one last time. Another message from Daniel had come through. We need to figure out finances. You can't just walk away from everything. She read it once, then locked the screen. Because the truth was simple. She wasn't walking away from anything. She was letting him stay just long enough to believe it was his. Elena didn't sleep that night, not because she couldn't, but because she chose not to. Sleep would have softened the edges, blurred the clarity she needed. And right now, she needed everything sharp. The city outside her windows moved through its usual rhythm, lights fading, traffic thinning, then slowly building again as morning crept closer. She stayed in the same spot for hours, tablet in hand, going through records she had deliberately ignored for too long. Not business records, personal ones. At midnight, Janet sent the first file. Encrypted, time-stamped, organized down to the minute. Elena opened it without hesitation. The first photo loaded. Daniel, sitting in a restaurant booth. Across from him, Clara, leaning in, smiling like she belonged there. Elena's eyes didn't flicker. She swiped to the next. Another restaurant, different night, same pattern, then another. Lunch meetings that weren't meetings. Evenings that were supposed to be late work hours. She kept scrolling. The timestamps lined up with everything Daniel had told her. Every excuse. Every lie, there it was, not just betrayal. Precision, he didn't even try to hide it from himself. Janet's message followed. Just from you. Elena read that twice, then continued. Hotel records, receipts, payment logs. That's where it shifted. Because the payments didn't come from Daniel. Not really. They traced back to corporate accounts. Not directly. Not obviously. But the pattern was there if you knew how to look. He had been using access he never questioned. Resources he assumed he had earned. He never asked who approved them. He never asked why. Because he believed the story he told himself, that he was rising on his own, that he deserved everything he had. Elena leaned back slightly, her fingers still resting on the tablet. For a moment, something cold settled in her chest. Not anger. Something quieter. Recognition. Janet sent another file. This one labeled Private Messages. Elena hesitated for half a second, then opened it. A group chat. Clara and 3 friends. The tone shifted immediately. Not subtle. Not careful. Cruel. Clara, he still thinks she's the one with nothing. It's actually kind of funny. Friend, wait. Seriously? Clara, yeah. She pays for everything. He just doesn't realize it. Friend, then why are you with him? Clara, because he thinks he's going somewhere. And honestly, she's boring. Elena's thumb paused on the screen. Clara, no style, no ambition, just small. Friend, that's harsh. Clara, I'm doing her a favor. She doesn't even know what she has. Elena locked the screen. That was enough, not because she couldn't handle more, because she had seen everything she needed. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was layered. Disrespect, entitlement, mockery. All built on a lie they didn't even understand. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a call from Richard. She answered immediately. We've reviewed the materials, he said. His voice was tighter now, controlled but no longer neutral. It's worse than we thought. I know. There's a direct violation of internal policy. Multiple, actually. Conflict of interest, misuse of corporate resources, ethics breach. Elena stood and walked slowly across the room. Can we prove it? Yes. How clean? Completely clean. Documented. Time-stamped. Legal will sign off without hesitation. Elena stopped near the window again. And if we move? Richard didn't answer right away. Then it triggers immediate termination. For both of them? Yes. Elena closed her eyes for a brief second. This was the line. Not emotional, not personal, structural. Do it, she said. A pause. Are you sure? Yes. Timing? Morning. Richard exhaled quietly. Understood. She ended the call. Silence returned again, but it felt different now. Not passive, active. Elena picked up the tablet one more time and opened Daniel's employee file again. His performance reviews were all there, strong, consistent, promising, because she had made sure they were, because she had believed in him, because she thought support would build something real. Instead, it built arrogance. She closed the file and opened another, Clara's. Lower position, limited access, but still within the executive layer, still bound by the same policies. Policies Elena had personally approved years ago. Clear, written, signed. No relationships between employees that created conflicts of interest. No exceptions. Clara had signed it. Daniel had indirectly agreed to it through internal conduct standards. They had both chosen to ignore it. Now it would matter. Elena set the tablet down and finally poured herself a glass of water. Not wine. She needed clarity, not comfort. Her phone lit up again. Daniel. She watched it ring, let it stop. Another message followed immediately. They fired Clara, then another. Something's going on at work. Elena didn't move. The timing had already started. Phase 1. She picked up the phone, read the messages again, then placed it face down on the counter. Across the city, Daniel was starting to feel it. Not the truth. Not yet. Just the shift. The imbalance. The first crack in the world he thought he understood. Elena walked back to the window, watching the skyline as the first light of morning touched the buildings. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate. This wasn't victory. Not yet. This was alignment. Actions meeting consequences. Nothing more. Her phone buzzed one last time, a short message from Richard. It's done. Both terminated. Elena stared at the words for a long moment. Then another message followed. He's asking questions. She didn't reply. Because questions meant confusion. Confusion meant instability. And instability was where everything started to fall apart. Daniel didn't understand what was happening. That was the problem. He stood in the middle of the HR conference room, still holding the termination letter like it might change if he stared at it long enough. The words stayed the same. Clear, formal, final. Violation of company conduct policy. That's ridiculous, he snapped, looking from the HR manager to the corporate attorney sitting beside her. You can't fire someone over rumors. These are not rumors, the HR manager replied calmly. The evidence has been reviewed and documented. What evidence? The attorney slid a puller slightly forward on the table but didn't open it. You were informed of the policy when you signed your employment agreement. The violation is sufficient grounds for termination. Daniel's jaw tightened. So that's it? No warning? No meeting? Just done? Yes, she said, effective immediately. For a moment, Daniel just stood there, breathing harder than he realized. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. He had plans. He had leverage. He had control, or at least he thought he did. He grabbed the letter and pushed his chair back harder than necessary. This is insane, he muttered. I'll talk to someone higher up. This won't hold. The HR manager didn't react. "There is no one higher up to appeal to in this case," she said evenly. Daniel didn't hear the implication. Or maybe he refused to. He walked out of the room without another word, his mind already racing ahead. Someone had targeted him. That was the only explanation. Someone in the company wanted him out. Jealousy. Office politics. It happened all the time. This wasn't about him. It couldn't be. 20 minutes later, Clara walked out of the same building in tears. Daniel saw her from across the parking lot, her makeup smudged, her phone pressed to her ear, as she tried to explain something that didn't make sense. "They fired me too," she said, the second she reached him. Daniel blinked. "What?" "They said I violated some clause. Something about relationships and internal policy. I don't even," she stopped, shaking her head. "This is insane. They can't do this." Daniel felt something shift in his chest. 2 terminations. Same morning, same reason, not random. "Targeted. I told you," he said, his voice tightening. "Someone's behind this." Clara wiped her eyes. "Who would do this?" Daniel didn't answer right away, because the truth was he didn't know, but someone had enough power to remove both of them without warning, without hesitation. That wasn't a mid-level manager move. That came from higher, much higher. He pulled out his phone and started dialing. Contacts, colleagues, anyone who might give him an answer. No one picked up. Or, worse, they did, and their tone changed the second he mentioned what happened. Careful, distant, like they already knew, like they didn't want to be involved. Clara grabbed his arm. "Daniel, what about the house? We still have that, right?" He hesitated for a second. "Of course we do," he said quickly. "This doesn't affect that. He needed that to be true. Because everything else had just been taken away." They drove back in silence. When they pulled into the driveway, Daniel noticed something strange. A car he didn't recognize parked along the curb. Dark, unmarked. "Probably nothing," he muttered, more to himself than to Clara. They walked inside. The house felt different. Same furniture. Same layout. But something about it felt off, like the space had shifted when Elena left. Clara dropped her bag on the couch and paced. "We need to figure this out fast. I can't just lose my job like this." Daniel nodded, already opening his laptop. "I will. Give me a second." He logged into his work email. Still active. For now. He searched for anything. Internal memos. HR. Reminders. Nothing unusual. No warning. No hint. Then he opened his employment contract, scrolled. Page after page of standard legal language. Until something caught his eye. A clause he had never paid attention to before. Employment subject to termination at discretion of corporate oversight based on ethical violations, conflicts of interest, or misuse of company resources. Corporate oversight. He leaned back slightly, that phrase again. It showed up in promotion emails, performance reviews, internal approvals. He had always assumed it was just corporate language, a formality. But now it didn't feel like a formality, it felt like a door. One he had never looked behind. Clara was still pacing. "Call someone," she said. "Anyone. This can't just happen." "I am," Daniel snapped, more sharply than he intended. She stopped, staring at him. "Don't take it out on me. I just lost everything too. Everything." The word echoed in his head, because he was starting to realize something. He might not have lost everything. He might have never owned anything at all. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. "Hello?" "Mr. Reeves," a woman's voice said. Professional, controlled. "This is Patricia Lawson from Lawson & Gray Legal. I'm calling regarding a filing submitted this morning." Daniel frowned. "What filing?" "A divorce petition. Filed on behalf of Elena Carter." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "What?" "It has been officially submitted to the court. You will receive formal documentation within the next 24 hours. Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. "She filed?" "Yes." He laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "That doesn't make any sense. She just left." "We haven't even Mr. Reeves," Patricia interrupted gently. "The filing is already processed. This is simply a notification." Daniel didn't speak. Clara watched him, her expression shifting from frustration to confusion. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't answer her. He couldn't. Because for the first time since this started, something didn't feel random anymore. Job gone. Clara gone. And now Elena filing for divorce. Too clean. Too fast. Too precise, like someone had planned it. The voice on the phone continued, "If you have legal representation, they can contact our office. Otherwise, instructions will be included in the documents." The call ended. Daniel lowered the phone slowly. Clara stepped closer. "Daniel, what's going on?" He looked at her, but his focus wasn't really on her anymore. It was somewhere else, somewhere just out of reach. "Elena filed for divorce," he said quietly. Clara blinked. "So? You were going to do that anyway." Daniel shook his head slowly. "No, not like this. Because this didn't feel like a reaction. It felt like a move, and suddenly he wasn't sure he was the one making them anymore. His laptop screen was still open in front of him, the words corporate oversight staring back at him. For the first time, Daniel felt something he couldn't explain. Not anger, not confusion, something deeper. Unease. Like there was a structure around him he had never seen, and someone else was deciding exactly how it would collapse. Daniel didn't sleep either, but unlike Elena, his exhaustion came from confusion, not control. He sat at the kitchen table long after Clara had gone upstairs, staring at the same set of documents over and over again. His termination letter. The printed copy of the divorce notice that had arrived by email. His employment contract. Nothing changed. Nothing made sense. By morning, he had convinced himself of one thing. This wasn't coincidence. Someone had decided to take him down. The problem was, he couldn't figure out who. Clara came downstairs around 8, her expression tight, her movements sharper than usual. She didn't greet him, didn't ask how he was. "Did you fix it?" she asked instead. Daniel looked up slowly. "Fix what?" "Our jobs," she snapped. "What do you think?" "I'm working on it. That's not an answer." I called people. No one's talking. It's like they've all been told to stay out of it. Clara folded her arms. "So what, we just accept this?" "No," he said quickly. "There has to be someone above HR, someone who signed off on this. Then find them." Her tone wasn't supportive. It was impatient. That irritated him more than he expected. "I'm trying," he said, his voice tightening. Clara didn't respond. She walked to the counter, picked up her phone, and started scrolling, looking for something else. Something better. Daniel noticed. Of course he did. And for the first time, something about that bothered him. Not enough to confront her, but enough to feel it. His phone buzzed. Unknown number again. He answered immediately. "Yeah?" "Mr. Reeves," the voice said, calm and professional. "This is Capital Bank regarding your credit account." Daniel frowned. "What about it?" "We've received a request from the primary account holder to suspend access and review recent transactions." He blinked. "What primary account holder?" "That's my card. According to our records, you are listed as an authorized user under a corporate account." Daniel sat up straighter. "That's not right. I've been using that card for over a year." "Yes, sir. And the charges are currently under review. The account holder has flagged multiple transactions for verification." His stomach dropped slightly. "What transactions?" "Hotel stays, dining, jewelry purchases." Clara froze across the room. Daniel swallowed. "That's just normal usage. I can explain that." "Of course," the voice said politely. "However, until the review is complete, the account will remain restricted." The call ended. Daniel lowered the phone slowly. Clara stared at him. "What was that?" He didn't answer right away. Because he wasn't thinking about the card. He was thinking about something else. Corporate account. Authorized user. That phrase again. Just like at work. Just like in the contract. He stood up abruptly and walked to his laptop. "What are you doing?" Clara asked. "I'm checking something." He logged into his online banking. The account loaded, and for the first time he actually looked at it, really looked. The checking account balance was higher than he remembered. Much higher. He scrolled through the transaction history. Deposits, regular, consistent, from sources he didn't recognize. BW Holdings, Orion Financial Services, internal transfers labeled with codes he had never paid attention to. He frowned. "What is this?" Clara stepped closer. "What?" "Look at this." He pointed at the screen. "These deposits, I didn't make these." Clara leaned in, scanning the numbers. Then who did? Daniel's mind raced. There was only one other person on the account. "Elena," he said, quiet. "With what money? She barely makes anything." Daniel didn't respond, because that was the problem. He had always believed that. Without questioning it, he scrolled further back, more deposits. Larger ones. Months. Years. All the way back to when they bought the house. His chest tightened. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. Clara crossed her arms again. Maybe she had savings. Or family money. Daniel shook his head. Not like this. Not consistently. He opened another tab. Pulled up the mortgage account. Or what he thought was the mortgage account. Payment history. Regular transfers. But something felt off. The account number. The structure. It didn't look like a typical loan setup. He clicked into the details. Ownership BW Holdings Trust. Daniel stared at the screen. What does that mean? Clara asked. It means he stopped because he didn't actually know. But it didn't feel right. Didn't we buy this house together? Clara pressed. Yes. With her inheritance. Yes. Then why is it under a trust? Daniel's mouth went dry. He remembered the paperwork, sort of. Elena handling most of it. Saying she'd take care of the details. That it was easier that way. He had signed where she told him to sign. Because he trusted her. Because he didn't think it mattered. Because he assumed everything was shared. He never checked. Not once. A knock at the door cut through the silence. Both of them froze. Daniel frowned and walked toward it slowly. When he opened it, 3 people stood outside. A woman in a tailored suit. 2 men behind her. Mr. Reeves? She asked. Yeah. She held out a folder. I'm with property management. I'm here regarding this residence. Daniel didn't take the folder. What about it? The property owned by BW Holdings Trust. We've issued a formal notice of occupancy termination. He blinked. What? You have 30 days to vacate. The words didn't register at first. That's not possible, he said. This is my house. The woman's expression didn't change. According to the deed, it is not. Daniel felt the ground shift under him. Clara stepped closer behind him. There is no mistake, the woman replied. Calmly, all documentation is included. Daniel finally took the folder. His hands felt heavier than they should. Inside were the papers, official, stamped, clear, ownership. BW Holdings Trust. Not his name, not even Elena's. Just the trust. He flipped through the pages faster, like speed would change the outcome. It didn't. This doesn't make any sense, he said, his voice thinner now. The woman nodded slightly. You can contact the listed legal office if you have questions. She turned and walked away. The 2 men followed. Daniel stood there in the doorway. The papers in his hands, the house behind him, suddenly unfamiliar. Clara whispered, Daniel, he didn't answer. Because something had just cracked open. Not the full truth. Not yet. But enough. Enough to realize he might not have been standing on solid ground this entire time. Daniel didn't move for a long time after the door closed. The folder stayed open in his hands, the words blurring together until they stopped feeling like language and started feeling like weight. Clara was still behind him, but quieter now. Not impatient, not sharp, just uneasy. Daniel, she said carefully, we need to figure this out. He nodded once, slowly, then walked back inside without answering. For the first time since the termination, something inside him shifted. This wasn't just bad luck. This wasn't just someone targeting his job. This was bigger, and somehow it was connected. He sat down again, this time with his laptop already open. His hands moved faster now, less hesitant. Search bar, BW Holdings Trust. The first results were vague, legal filings, asset management references, corporate structures. Nothing personal, nothing clear. But one thing stood out. The trust wasn't small. It was tied to multiple entities. One of them made his breath hitch. Orion Systems, Daniel frowned, leaning closer to the screen. That's my company, he muttered. Clara stepped in again. What? Orion Systems, that's the parent company. She looked confused. So why is the trust connected to it? Clara shrugged. Big companies have investors. Maybe it's just one of them. Maybe. That should have made sense. But it didn't, not with everything else. Not with the deposits, the accounts, the house. Daniel clicked deeper. Shift structures, subsidiaries. Orion Systems was at the top. Under it, dozens of divisions. One of them was his department. Another was the financial services arm tied to his accounts. He sat back slightly, a slow, uncomfortable realization forming. Everything in his life, his job, his salary, his promotions, his bonuses, even the bank account he used, all of it led back to the same place, Orion Systems. And now so did the trust that owned his house. Clara crossed her arms again. You're overthinking this. Daniel didn't respond right away. Because he wasn't thinking about systems anymore. He was thinking about Elena. her silence, the way she had looked at him when he told her to leave. Not angry, not desperate, just done. And that didn't match the woman he thought he knew. He shook his head, slightly, trying to push the thought away. No, there was no way Elena was connected to any of this. She worked a mid-level role, quiet, reliable, invisible. That's what he had always believed. That's what everyone believed. His phone buzzed again, another unknown number. He hesitated this time, then answered. Hello? Mr. Reeves, a different voice said. Female, controlled. This is Morgan and Hale Legal Group. We represent BW Holdings Trust. Spine stiffened. Okay, we're reaching out to confirm that you received the notice regarding the property. I did, he said. But there's been some kind of mistake. There has not, the voice replied calmly. However, if you wish to dispute the notice, you may schedule a consultation. Daniel swallowed. I want to understand who owns the trust. A brief pause. I'm afraid that information is not publicly disclosed. Then who signed the eviction? He pressed. Another pause, slightly longer this time. It was authorized through the trust's executive office. That doesn't answer my question. No, she said, still calm. It doesn't. The call ended before he could push further. Daniel stared at his phone. Clara looked at him, her expression tightening again. What did they say? Nothing useful. That's not good enough. Daniel stood up abruptly. Then, what do you want me to do? Her voice rose. It's, fix it. That's what you always do. The words hit harder than she probably intended, because suddenly he wasn't sure that was true anymore. There was a time when he believed he controlled everything. His career, his finances, his home. Now every piece of it felt like it belonged to someone else, and he didn't even know who that someone was. Clara turned away first this time, not dramatic, just distant. Daniel noticed that too. Of course he did. He opened his laptop again, more aggressively now. If the trust wouldn't tell him who owned it, he would find another way. He searched Orion Systems instead, not the public site. Deeper, articles, industry reports, financial disclosures. Names started appearing. Board members, investors, executives. Then one article caught his attention. It wasn't new, but it wasn't old either. A profile piece about Orion's leadership structure. He clicked it. The headline was simple. Inside the silent leadership of Orion Systems. Daniel scanned quickly. Mentions of a decentralized executive model, a controlling entity that rarely appeared publicly. Decisions routed through a private office. No clear CEO listed in the usual sense. Just authority, hidden, distributed, controlled. His pulse picked up slightly. He scrolled further. There, a name, not in bold, not highlighted, almost buried in the article. Executive Authority Representative E. Carter. Daniel froze. The room went quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. Clara was saying something behind him, but he didn't hear it. He leaned closer to the screen, rereading the line again. E. Carter. It could be anyone. Of course it could. Common name, common initial. But his chest tightened anyway. Because suddenly, too many pieces were starting to point in the same direction. The trust, the house, the accounts, the company. And now that name. Elena Carter. He shook his head, almost violently. No, he muttered, stepped closer again. What? Clara stepped screen toward her. Look at this. She scanned it quickly, then shrugged. So? It scanned it quickly, then shrugged. So? It's just a name. But his voice didn't sound convinced anymore, because the first time Daniel wasn't just confused. He was afraid, not of losing his job, not of losing the house, but of something else. Something much worse. The possibility that he had completely misunderstood the person he had just thrown away. Daniel didn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table long after Clara had gone to bed, the glow of his laptop casting sharp shadows across the room that no longer felt like his. The article was still open, the same line, the same name. E. Carter. He read it again, then again. Every time it felt less like coincidence and more like something he had refused to see. By morning, he had made a decision. He needed proof. Not guesses, not patterns, something real. He drove a house early before most people arrived. The building looked the same, glass, steel. Clean lines that once made him feel important. Today it felt different, like walking into something he didn't understand anymore. The security guard at the front desk barely looked up. Morning, Daniel nodded, swiping his badge. It still worked. For now, that small detail gave him a strange sense of relief. Inside, the office was quiet, lights still dimmed, desks empty. The calm before the day started. He walked straight to his workstation, sitting down and logging in with steady hands. He wasn't here to work. He was internal directories, employee records, executive files. Most of it was restricted as expected. But Daniel had been in the company long enough to know where the edges were, where things were stored, where things weren't supposed to be found. He pulled up Orion's internal org chart first. At the surface level, it looked exactly like it always had. Department heads, directors, layers of management. Nothing unusual. But then he toggled a different view, one he had never paid attention to before. Ownership structure. The screen took a second longer to load. Then it appeared. Not names, entities, holding companies, trusts, legal wrappers that meant nothing to most employees. But now they meant everything. Daniel leaned closer. Orion Systems controlled by Orion Holdings. Orion Holdings controlled by BW Holdings Trust. The same trust. The same one that had just removed him from his house. His pulse quickened. He clicked deeper, navigating through layers of filings and internal notes. There were references to an executive office, a private approval channel. Decisions routed through a single authority point. No name listed. Just a designation, primary authority. His throat tightened. He searched the designation. Nothing public, nothing obvious. But buried in a compliance document, there was a signature block. Initials. E.C. Daniel sat back slowly. It wasn't enough. It still wasn't enough. He needed something that tied it directly to her, to Elena. Because right now, it was still possible he was wrong. Still possible that this was all coincidence. Still possible that he hadn't just destroyed his own life. His phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't an unknown number. It was his former manager. Daniel answered immediately. "Hey." The voice on the other end was tense. "Daniel, where are you?" "At the office." A pause. "You shouldn't be. I still have access." "Not for long," the manager said quietly. "HR is flagging your account today." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I need information. That's not how this works." "It is now," Daniel said. "Tell me what's going on." Another pause. Then, lower, almost hesitant. "What does that mean?" "Executive directives." Sudden quiet. Legal-backed. Daniel leaned forward. "From who, I don't know," the manager said quickly. "Nobody does." "That's the point." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "That's not true," he said. "Someone knows." The manager exhaled. "Look off the record." "Yeah, whatever is happening, it's coming from above, board level, way above." Daniel's grip tightened around the phone. Above the board. Above everything. There weren't many places that could come from. "Have you ever heard the name Elena Carter connected to this company?" Daniel asked. Silence. Not confused silence. Careful silence. "I can't talk about that," the manager said. Daniel's heart slammed hard against his chest. "You can't or you won't." "I have to go," the manager replied quickly. "You should leave, Daniel. Seriously." The line went dead. Daniel stared at the phone for a long moment. That wasn't denial, that wasn't ignorance, that was fear, and it told him more than any confirmation could have. He stood up slowly, the room suddenly feeling smaller. He walked toward the glass wall overlooking the city, the same view he used to admire. Now it felt distant, unreal. Because if what he was starting to believe was true, then everything he thought he had built, what was quiet stouts behind him, made him turn. Someone had entered the office, not security, not HR. A man in a dark suit, older, composed. Not someone Daniel recognized, but the way he moved said everything. Controlled, certain. He wasn't here by accident. "Mr. Reeves," the man said calmly. Daniel straightened. "Who are you?" The man stepped closer, holding out a card. Daniel took it. "Morgan and Hale Legal Group." "The same firm?" "We need to speak," the man said. Daniel's pulse spiked. "About what?" "Your continued access to company systems and your presence in a property you no longer have rights to." Daniel clenched his jaw. "I'm not leaving until I get answers." The man studied him for a moment. Then something shifted slightly in his expression. Not concern, not sympathy. Just acknowledgement. "As you wish," he said. But understand held his gaze. "You are not being targeted randomly," the man continued. "Every action taken so far has been authorized through proper channels." Daniel stepped forward. "By who?" The man didn't answer directly. Instead, he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a document. "Not offering it. just holding it where Daniel could see the header. Executive Authorization Record. Daniel's eyes locked onto the bottom of the page. The signature line. The initials. EC, the same ones. The same pattern. The same truth getting harder to deny. Daniel's voice dropped. That doesn't mean anything. The man tilted his head slightly. It will. A beat of silence. Then he added, almost casually, "You may want to check your email." Daniel frowned, pulling his phone out immediately. There was a new message, no sender name. Just an internal routing address. Subject line, board meeting notice, mandatory attendance. His breath caught. He opened it. The time. That afternoon. The location. Executive floor. And at the bottom authorization required by primary authority. Daniel looked back up, his chest tightening. "Why am I being called to a board meeting?" he asked. The man met his eyes. For the first time, there was something almost like certainty in his voice. "Because," he said quietly, "you're about to find out who you've been working for all along." Daniel's fingers tightened around his phone. Because deep down, he already knew the answer. He just didn't want to say her name out loud. Daniel didn't remember walking out of the office. One moment he was staring at the email on his phone, the next he was outside, the city noise crashing back into him like something distant and unreal. Board meeting. Executive floor. Primary authority. Every word felt heavier now. Because it wasn't just a meeting. It was an answer, or a confirmation of something he wasn't ready to face. He got into his car but didn't start it right away. His hands rested on the wheel, fingers tense, eyes unfocused. Elena's face came back to him. Not the version he had argued with, not the version he had dismissed. The one from yesterday, standing in front of the house. Calm, unshaken, as if she already knew something he didn't. He exhaled sharply and started the engine. He had hours before the meeting, and there was one thing he needed to do before that. He drove across the city, barely noticing traffic, barely noticing time. The route was familiar, but it felt different now. Because he wasn't going home. He was going back to something he had already lost. When he pulled up, the house looked exactly the same. Clean lawn, quiet street, nothing dramatic. But it wasn't his anymore. The realization hit harder now that he understood what that actually meant. Daniel stepped out of the car slowly. There was a lockbox on the front door. New, temporary, professional, legal. Everything about it said the same thing. You don't belong here. He walked closer anyway. He didn't try the door. He didn't touch the lockbox. He just stood there. For a long moment. Then he noticed something. Across the street, a black sedan, parked engine off, but someone inside, watching. Daniel's jaw tightened. Of course. This wasn't just a property transfer. It was controlled, managed, observed. He let out a quiet breath, stepping back from the door. He wasn't here to fight. Not anymore. He turned and got back into his car. As he drove away, something settled inside him. Not peace, not acceptance. Just clarity. Whatever Elena was, whoever she really was. She hadn't reacted yesterday. She hadn't argued. She hadn't even tried to stay. Because she didn't need to. Because she had already decided something, and he was only now catching up to it. Back at the office, the building felt different again. Full this time. People moving, talking. But there was an undercurrent Daniel hadn't noticed before. Something quiet. Something tense. He walked through the lobby, and for the first time he noticed the way people looked at him. Not openly, not directly, but it was there. Recognition, whispers. He reached the elevators, swiping his badge again, still active. Barely, the doors opened and he stepped inside. Executive floor required special clearance. He knew that. Everyone knew that. He had never been up there, never had a reason. Until now. He pressed the button anyway. Nothing happened, of course. He exhaled slowly, leaning back against the wall. Then his phone buzzed, another message. Unknown sender, just 2 words. Use override. Attached was a temporary access code. Daniel stared at it. Who sent this? Why? He hesitated for a second, then entered the code. The panel lit up. The executive floor button unlocked. The elevator started moving. His pulse quickened as the numbers climbed. Each floor felt slower than the last. Each second stretched tighter, until finally the doors opened. The space was nothing like the rest of the building. Quieter, controlled glass walls, minimal design. Everything precise. There were people here, but not many, and they weren't moving casually. They were waiting. A woman at the front desk looked up as he stepped out. Her expression didn't change, but her posture did. Straighter, more formal. "Mr. Reeves," she said, "you're expected." Daniel stopped in front of her. "Who sent me the access code?" She didn't answer. Instead, she gestured toward a hallway. "The boardroom is prepared." Prepared. The word sat wrong he was attending, like this wasn't something arranged for him. He walked down the hallway slowly. Every step felt heavier, every detail sharper. At the end of the corridor was a set of double doors, closed, waiting. Daniel reached for the handle, paused for just a second, then pushed them open. The room inside was large, long table, floor-to-ceiling windows, city stretching out beyond it, and around the table the board. People he had only seen in internal profiles, names tied to decisions he never questioned. They were all there, seated, watching. The moment he stepped in, conversation stopped, silence fell, and every eye turned to him. Daniel's chest tightened. This wasn't a normal's meeting. This was something else. He took a step forward, then another. No one spoke. No one greeted him. They just watched, like they already knew something he didn't. At the far end of the table, one chair remained empty, centered, intentional, not for him. He knew that instinctively, because even without seeing her, he could feel it. That was her seat. A quiet sound behind him made him turn. The doors had closed. Soft, final. He didn't in again, and for the first time, Daniel understood. This wasn't about his job. This wasn't about his house. This was about power. Real power. The kind he had never actually had. Footsteps echoed from the side entrance. Light, measured, unhurried. Daniel's heart slammed hard against his chest. He didn't turn right away, because part of him already knew, and part of him wasn't ready to confirm it. The footsteps stopped, right behind him, close enough that he could feel the presence. The room stayed silent, waiting, then a voice. Calm, familiar, controlled. "You made it." Daniel closed his eyes for half a second, then turned and saw her. Daniel couldn't breathe for a second. Elena stood there, not in the soft clothes he was used to seeing, not in the quiet version of herself he had dismissed for years. She looked the same, and completely different. Tailored black suit, hair pulled back, no jewelry except a single understated watch, no hesitation, no uncertainty. She didn't look like someone who had been thrown out of her home the night before. She looked like she had walked into her own space, because she had. The room didn't react loudly, no surprise, no shock, just a shift, subtle, respectful. Every person at that table had straightened slightly. Daniel noticed it. That was the first thing that hit him. Not her, not the realization, the reaction of everyone else. They already knew. Elena walked past him without stopping. No glance, no acknowledgement. She moved to the head of the table and took the empty seat. The one he had already understood wasn't his. Silence settled deeper. Daniel stood there, still near the door, unsure where he even belonged in this room. For the first time in years, he felt small, not because someone made him feel that way, because the truth did. Elena placed a folder in front of her, then looked up. Her eyes moved across the room, calm, measured. Then, finally, they landed on him. Not so soft, not angry, just clear. "You can sit," she said. Her voice was steady, professional. Like this wasn't personal, like he wasn't her husband. Daniel moved without thinking, taking a seat at the far end of the table, as far from her as the room allowed. No one spoke until she did. Elena, one of the board members, said carefully, "Shall we proceed?" Daniel caught it. Not Miss Carter, not any title, just her name. Familiar, but weighted with something else. Authority. She nodded once. "Let's keep this efficient." Efficient, like everything that had happened to him in the last 24 hours. Her eyes flicked to a man on her right. Legal. The man from earlier stood slightly, opening his folder. Per internal policy and executive authorization, he began. "The termination of Daniel Reeves and Clara Weston has been executed due to violation of company conduct guidelines, specifically undisclosed conflict of interest and misuse of company resources." Daniel felt the words hit harder now. Not because they were new, but because of who had authorized them. He looked at Elena. She didn't look at him. The legal advisor continued. "Additionally, all associated benefits, access privileges, and financial extensions connected to company-managed systems have been suspended. Everything. Gone. Not gradually. Not negotiable. Just removed." Elena? Another board member spoke. There has been internal concern regarding the speed of these actions. She nodded slightly. I'm aware. Her tone didn't change. There was sufficient documentation to justify immediate enforcement. Daniel's hands clenched under the table. Documentation, proof, records. She had known. For how long? He leaned forward slightly. You. He stopped himself. The room was watching, not him, her. Everything moved around her. He swallowed, correcting himself. Miss Carter, this is excessive. The room went still. Elena looked at him fully now. And for the first time there was something in her expression, not anger, not satisfaction, just recognition. You believe that? She asked. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. Daniel held her gaze. You could have handled this privately. A pause. Then slowly she leaned back in her chair. We are handling it privately, she said. The words landed harder than anything else, because she was right. This wasn't public. This wasn't chaos. This was controlled, clean, final. Daniel's chest tightened. You didn't have to, I did, she said, cutting him off. Still calm, still controlled. You signed a code of conduct agreement when you accepted your position, she continued. You also signed financial disclosure documents tied to internal accounts. Daniel's mind raced, those forms. Routine. He barely remembered signing them. You violated both, she said simply. Her voice didn't rise, didn't accuse. It just stated. And the consequences were already defined. Daniel shook his head. This isn't about policy. For the first time, the room shifted. Because now, it was personal. Elena didn't deny it, but she didn't accept it either. It's exactly about policy, she said. A beat. Then, she added, quieter. You just never thought it would apply to you. That hit. Harder than anything else. Because it was true. He had never thought the rules were meant for him. Not really, not when he believed he was the one in control. Daniel's voice dropped. You could have told me. The room didn't react, but the air changed. This wasn't about the company anymore. This was about them. Elena held his gaze for a long moment. Then she asked, when? He frowned slightly. When should I have told you? She continued. Before or after you decided I wasn't worth keeping? Daniel didn't answer, because there was no answer that didn't make it worse. She looked away first, back to the table, back to the room, the space where she belonged. Let's move on, she said. Just like that. Like the conversation was over. Like he didn't matter anymore. The meeting continued. Numbers, reports, decisions. Daniel barely heard any of it, because everything in his head had already collapsed. Every assumption, every belief, every version of his life. Gone. Rewritten. By the person he had underestimated the most. After what felt like hours, the meeting ended. Chairs shifted, papers closed, people stood, but no one rushed out. They waited. For her. Elena stood last, clickling her folder, composed, untouched. Daniel pushed his chair back, quickly standing. He couldn't let this end like that. Not without something. Wait, he said. The room stilled again. She paused. What now? Now, she asked. Her voice was distant. Professional again. Like whatever had just happened between them was already filed away. Daniel stepped forward. Not close, but closer. This isn't over, he said. Not a threat, not confident, just desperate. Elena finally turned slightly, just enough to look at him over her shoulder. It is, she said. Simple, final. Then she added, quieter, almost as an afterthought. You just didn't realize it when you made your decision. Daniel felt something in his chest drop. Because she wasn't talking about the meeting, or the company. She was talking about the moment he chose to throw her out. The moment everything ended. She walked out, no hesitation, no pause. The board followed, one by one, until Daniel was the only one left in the room, alone. In a space that had never been his phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from an unknown number. He opened it slowly. One line. Divorce. Divorce documents have been filed. Review with your counsel. Daniel stared at the screen, then looked up at the empty chair at the head of the table, and for the first time he understood. He hadn't just lost his job. He hadn't just lost his house. He had lost access to her. Completely. And there was nothing left he could do about it. The building felt different when Elena walked in that morning. Not because it had changed, because she no longer had to pretend she didn't belong there. No quiet entrances. No side elevators. No careful avoidance of recognition. People saw her now. Really saw her, and they didn't hesitate. Good morning, Miss Carter. Respect wasn't subtle anymore. It wasn't hidden behind emails or indirect approvals. It was direct, earned, undeniable. She nodded as she moved through the lobby, steady and composed. No rush, no need to prove anything. The weight she had carried for years, the need to be smaller, quieter, easier to accept, was gone. The boardroom doors opened before she reached them. Inside, the meeting was already set, screens lit, reports prepared, decisions waiting. But this time there was no gap between who she was and how she lived, no hidden identity, no divided life. She took her seat at the head of the table without hesitation, and this time she stayed exactly as she was. The meeting moved smoothly, confident, clear. Every decision was hers to make, and everyone in that room understood it. There were no questions about authority, no second guessing. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Control wasn't loud. It was consistent. Afterward, as the room cleared, one of the senior board members paused beside her. "You've changed the direction of this company," he said carefully, "in a very short time." Elena closed her folder. "The direction was always there," she replied. "It just needed to be followed." He nodded, thoughtful, then left without another word. She sat for a moment longer after everyone else was gone. Not because she had more work, because she allowed herself that space now. No pressure, no pretending, just quiet. Her phone buzzed softly. A message, not from a lawyer, not from a board member, not from anyone tied to her past, just a name she recognized in a different way. Marcus Hale. She stared at it for a second, then opened it. Coffee later, no agenda, just conversation. No expectations, no assumptions, no need to perform. He had met her weeks ago, after everything had already come into the open. He had known who she was from the beginning, and somehow that had made things easier, not harder, because there was nothing left to prove. She typed a short reply. "Yes, that sounds good. No hesitation, no overthinking, just a choice." Elena stood, gathering her things, and left the room. Outside, the city moved the same as it always had. People rushing, traffic building, life continuing without pause. But for the first time in a long time, she felt separate from the noise, not isolated. Free. She passed the street where she used to wait for Daniel after work. The same corner, the same view. For a moment, the memory flickered. Not the anger, not even the betrayal. Just the version of herself who had stood there, believing that love meant staying quiet, that patience would be enough, that if she made herself small, she would be chosen. She didn't stop walking. That version of her was gone. Not erased, but understood. She had loved him. That part was real. But so was the way he had treated her when he thought she had nothing to offer, and that truth didn't need to be argued anymore. It had already proven itself. Her phone buzzed again. A notification this time. A financial article. Her name in the headline. Billionaire wife and CEO Elena Carter reshapes Orion Systems after internal scandal. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. The world knew now. Everything that had been hidden. Everything he had never seen. There was no unaware left. Only consequences and clarity. Later that afternoon, she met Marcus at a quiet cafe. No luxury. No spectacle. Just a simple place with soft light and steady conversation. He stood when she arrived, smiling in a way that felt grounded. "Hey," he said. No titles, no weight, just her name. She sat across from him, relaxed. They talked. Not about business, not about the company, not of the past, just normal things. And for once, normal didn't feel like something she had to shrink into. It felt like something she could choose. As the conversation settled into a comfortable silence, Marcus leaned back slightly. "You seem lighter," he said. Elena thought about that, then nodded. "I stopped hiding," she said simply. He didn't ask more. He didn't need to. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the street. Elena watched it for a moment. Not with regret, not with longing, just awareness. Her past wasn't something she had to carry forward anymore. It had done its part. It had shown her exactly what mattered, and what didn't. She stood to leave, Marcus walking beside her. No pressure, no expectations, just a beginning, different from anything she had known before. As she stepped back into the city, she didn't look back, not at the company, not at the house, not at the life she had outgrown, because she didn't need to reclaim anything anymore. She had already taken back what mattered. Her voice, her choices, her worth. And this time, she wasn't going to hide it for anyone. If someone only valued you when they knew your worth, they never deserved you in the first place. If this story stayed with you, let me know what you think and whether you would have made the same choice.